The MoMA has about 150,000 works. If you spent a minute looking at each of them, it would take you roughly 104 days to, quote unquote, see the MoMA. And that's a minute of no background, no context, and 104 days of no sleeping, no eating, no texting, no tweeting, no sex, just looking at art. The New York Public Library, it has about 53 million books. And if you were ambitious enough to read a book a day from the day that you were born to the day you die, it would take you, I don't know, about 2,000 human lifetimes to read the New York Public Library. In 2008, when the renovation plan for the library was announced, the then director, Paul Leclerc, was so excited about it that he proclaimed that it was going to be the largest comprehensive library open to the public in human history. Now, that sounds really familiar, because the largest comprehensive library open to the public in human history is not the New York Public Library, it's the internet. And of course, the point of all of this is not the same old information overload narrative, which isn't new either to us as people here tonight, nor is it unique to our time. It's a problem that we've dealt with pretty much since the dawn of human civilization. That's not the point. The volume is one thing. What I'm more concerned with is the modalities in which we access it and we make sense of it. Now, I don't know how many of you watched the Aaron Sorkin show, Newsroom. It is not without flaws, but there is one scene in it that really spoke to me, and especially in the context of what we're talking about tonight.
I miss encyclopedias. I always wanted to have a full set of encyclopedias. You pull down S off the shelf, flip to a page, you read about, I don't know, the Salic law and why a woman can't inherit the French throne.
You can Google it.
That's my point. You have to know what you're looking for. You can't browse for anything anymore.
So that's kind of true, right? We live in more and more in a search culture, not a browse and discovery culture. And in fact, discovery is something that I think about a lot. And it has quite a beautiful etymology, this notion of to discover, to uncover something that is already there, that exists. So discovery is not the same thing as invention. And which reminds me, one of the main criticisms of information, we want to call it curation, information filtration online, to Jeff's point, is something that we hear people saying, well, it has no value because you're not producing original content. And to me, that's as absurd as accusing a museum curator of not having originated every piece in an exhibition herself. When I was little, Alice in Wonderland was my favorite book that my grandmother used to read to me, and to this day, it is still one of my favorite books, and I think it's a beautiful metaphor, not just for the internet, but also for human curiosity in general, this notion of a wonderland of fascination and discovery and sort of excitement existing right beyond the fringes of our immediate awareness. It's right there for us, if only we're able to find the rabbit hole to it and follow the right white rabbit. So here's a little meta example of this thing at work. In 1969, Random House New York commissioned an artist to do a very limited edition of Alice in Wonderland, creating 11 heliographs for each chapter of the book and a cover one. The artist, as some of you may have noticed, this is the one from the first chapter, The White Rabbit, and the artist was Salvador Dali. Now, I love Alice in Wonderland, and I love Dali, and yet I had no idea that this even existed. And I came upon it through that precise rabbit hole of discovery. I had written a piece about an early color edition of Alice in Wonderland by this artist named Leonard Weisgard, which I'd come across in a footnote in an analog printed out-of-print book, collection of children's stories while I was doing research on illustration for children's stories by a little-known art director by the name of Andrew Warhol, whom I'd come across while doing research on Maurice Sendak's also little-known Velveteen Rabbit illustrations. Anyway, down that rabbit hole I went, and I emerged with the Leonard Weisgard Alice illustrations, and I wrote an article about them. Next thing I know, I get an email from a reader saying, I'm an enormous Dali collector and enthusiast. I know you love Alice. Did you know that he illustrated it? I, of course, did not. I was really excited. Now, the images, though, were not really available online or easily available. And in fact, we live in a culture where if it's not Googleable, it doesn't exist. So I ended up finding this gallery that had them, got in touch with them, got the images, did a little article around it, which ended up being one of the most circulated and well-read articles in my 7 years of writing about that sort of thing. And I think the reason is that not only did people get excited about it from an art history standpoint and a literary standpoint, but there's also a real element of this discovery being a pull for this remarkable work existing, but without our awareness of it. And certainly it resurfaces, you know. Which brings me to my favorite character in Alice. It's the mock turtle, and it's this melancholy character who used to be a real turtle at one time, and now he's a mock turtle. And so he meets Alice, and they engage in this nonsensical Lewis Carroll classic dialogue full of puns, and the mock turtle is talking about a fish school, and Alice is talking about her school as an academic institution, and they're sort of talking, but they're not really exchanging meaning because they're not really speaking the same language. And I think that, too, is a real metaphor for a lot of what's going on with human knowledge online and the enormous amount of cultural artifacts that are available to us. So much of it is mock information, mock knowledge. It was once real knowledge. It made sense, and it was made sense of when people engage with it, and now it just sits there. And it's there, but it's not, because we're not really accessing it or making sense of it or engaging with it. And it's kind of like this ghostly information that surrounds us, and if only we're able to make sense of it, it would mean something, and yet it doesn't. You know, one of my favorite historical figures, thinkers, is the writer Anais Nin, who's perhaps best known for her diaries, which she started writing at the age of 11 and wrote until she died. Some of them are digitized, some of them are not. But in the 5th volume, which I'm currently reading, I came across something that she says that I think really gets to the heart of it. And she says, "This is the role of the artist, to seek to renew and resharpen her senses by a new vision of the familiar." And I think that needs to be, at least to some degree, the role of curation, to find the meaningful and the timeless, and to make it timely again by resharpening our cultural awareness of it and our collective sensibility around it. And the way that I think we do this is we start with this base layer of information, which is just the stuff that's out there and available. And from it, we glean some sort of insight, so an understanding of what's meaningful out of that information. And then that becomes knowledge, which is really how different pieces of information relate to one another. So there's an element of interpretation and sort of consolidation of information. And at the very top is the wisdom, which is a practical understanding of how the world works, but also a moral wisdom about how the world should work and could work. And I think a great curator is really someone who's able to transmute this ghostly information, mock knowledge, into that form of wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was great.